The myth of control, how surrender leads to strength. We've been told all our lives that control is power, that the more you manage, anticipate, and plan for every outcome, the safer and stronger you'll be. From the moment we're born, we begin constructing invisible walls of certainty, routines, identities, labels, belief systems, schedules, goals. We're told that life is something to be conquered, and anything less is failure. And yet, life doesn't play by those rules. The child you love grows up and pulls away. The body you've disciplined suddenly breaks down. The marriage you trusted ends. The career you built dissolves. And suddenly you're left not just confused, but exposed. What no one teaches you is that control is an illusion. A myth we cling to because the alternative, vulnerability, feels unbearable. But what if that very vulnerability is where your transformation begins? What if the things you can't control aren't threats, but sacred invitations? What if losing control isn't the end of your strength, but the beginning of your freedom? In our modern world, control is worshipped like a god. We track our calories, our steps, our sleep. We build apps to monitor our moods and measure our progress. We curate our image on social media. We make plans for every hour of our day. And beneath all of this is fear. Fear that if we stop managing everything, we'll fall apart. Fear that surrender means weakness, that if we aren't holding all the pieces together, they'll scatter and we'll be nothing. But here's the paradox. The more we try to control life, the more anxious we become. Because deep down we know we're not in control, not really. We can influence, we can prepare, but we cannot command the winds. We cannot force outcomes. We cannot predict the future. We cannot stop death. This tension, the clash between our illusion of control and the reality of uncertainty, is the root of so much of our emotional suffering. And in that suffering, many people harden. They tighten their grip. They seek spiritual formulas, productivity systems, psychological hacks. But it's like trying to hold on to water. The tighter you squeeze, the less you hold. And then one day, something breaks. The illusion shatters. Maybe it's a diagnosis, a betrayal, a death, a sudden loss that makes it impossible to pretend anymore. You realize you were never in control to begin with, and in that moment, you have a choice. You can panic, fight, numb, or you can surrender, not as a giving up, but as a letting go. Letting go of the need to know, letting go of the fantasy that you can outrun pain, avoid grief, or force healing, letting go of the self-image you worked so hard to maintain. This is what C.S. Lewis called the deeper magic, a power not built on domination but on trust, not on mastery but on mystery. He wrote, "The real problem is not why some pious, humble, believing people suffer, but why some do not." Suffering, he believed, was not a punishment, but a portal, a space where the ego loosens and the soul begins to see. Surrender, in this light, is not passivity. It is radical cooperation with reality. It is facing what is instead of clinging to what was. It is meeting life on its terms, not yours. It is trusting that something wiser than your plans is at work, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. And yet surrender is terrifying. It feels like death. And in a way, it is. It's the death of the false self, the death of the story that says you must be in control to be worthy, safe, or strong. But what rises in its place is peace, a kind of quiet resilience that can walk through uncertainty with open hands, a kind of strength that does not demand answers, but learns how to wait. This is not weakness. This is spiritual maturity. This is the journey of the soul, not to escape uncertainty, but to find meaning inside it. In the next part, we'll explore how the myth of control shapes our daily lives, and how surrender, when practiced, becomes a doorway into wisdom, presence, and strength beyond fear. The myth of control, how surrender leads to strength. Control is seductive because it works, until it doesn't. And by the time it fails, it has already formed a prison around you. A prison built not with chains, but with expectations. The myth of control tells you that everything is a problem to be solved, a threat to be managed, a weakness to be hidden. So you strategize, You perfect. You micromanage your time, your relationships, your emotions. You apologize for your needs. You suppress your sadness. You fear your anger. You numb your anxiety. You do everything possible to stay one step ahead of pain. But pain is not the enemy. It's the signal that control is not working anymore. You begin to feel it in the smallest places. The tension in your chest when someone is late. The panic when plans change. The irritability when others don't meet your expectations. The exhaustion that never goes away, no matter how organized you are. Control becomes a lens and everything becomes a threat. Love starts to feel risky. Rest feels irresponsible. Vulnerability feels like danger. You find yourself needing constant certainty from your partner, constant validation from your work, constant reassurance from God. And none of it is enough. Why? Because control doesn't feed your soul. It silences it. It disconnects you from your body, your heart, and your intuition. It turns life into a performance, faith into a formula, spirituality into a checklist. And the worst part? The more control you seek, the more you lose the very things you long for. Peace, intimacy, meaning. This is the tragedy of control. It promises safety, but delivers isolation. It whispers that you are only as worthy as you are competent, that rest is laziness, that emotions are distractions, that God helps those who help themselves. But the gospel says something different. It says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." It says, "My power is made perfect in weakness." It says, "Whoever loses their life will find it." Surrender is not spiritual failure. It is the doorway to grace. And yet we resist it. We cling to the myth because it gives us a false sense of order. It tells us we're in charge. It makes us feel less afraid. But eventually, life forces us to confront the truth. We are not in control. We are fragile, finite, dependent. But we are also beloved. And that changes everything. Because if you are loved, not for your performance, but for your presence, then you can finally stop pretending. You can grieve. You can rest. You can stop managing everyone else's emotions. You can be honest about your limits. You can forgive yourself for not knowing what to do. And in that honesty, you begin to find something you didn't even know you were looking for. Freedom. Freedom not from pain, but from pretense. Freedom not from uncertainty, but from self-condemnation. Freedom not from responsibility, but from the illusion that everything depends on you. This is what surrender offers. Not escape, but release. The quiet courage to be exactly where you are, with all that you feel, and still be enough. In the next section, we'll explore how real strength is forged not in striving, but in surrender, and how letting go becomes the very thing that sets you free. The myth of control, how surrender leads to strength. Strength is not the absence of fear. It's the decision to keep your heart open in the presence of fear. And nothing opens the heart more radically, or more painfully, than surrender. We often think of strength in terms of dominance, control over emotions, outcomes, and even people. But real strength is something entirely different. It is the willingness to stay soft in a world that tells you to harden. It is the ability to say, "I don't know," and still move forward. It is the quiet power that emerges when you let go of the need to be seen as powerful. Surrender is not giving up. It's giving in to truth, to reality, to God. And that act of giving in is not defeat. It is alignment. Alignment with the deeper rhythms of life, with the seasons of the soul, with the mystery that you are not the source of your strength, but the recipient of it. C.S. Lewis understood this. In his spiritual journey, he wrestled deeply with the fear of losing control. As a rational thinker, he valued clarity, logic, structure. But when pain came, grief, loss, uncertainty, he was forced to enter a different kind of knowing, not the kind built in books, but the kind born in surrender. In A Grief Observed, Lewis wrote with raw honesty about his wife's death. He described the way faith sometimes feels like a closed door, how even the most devout can feel abandoned. But in that darkness, he discovered something sacred, a faith not built on answers but on presence. a God who does not always explain, but who always remains. This is the paradox of surrender. You stop demanding that God fix your life, and you start trusting that He is with you in the middle of it. You stop praying for control and start praying for communion. You stop seeking escape and start seeking alignment. This shift changes everything. Suddenly, your value is no longer tied to your performance. Your identity is no longer defined by success. Your peace is no longer dependent on outcomes. Instead, your soul becomes anchored in something deeper: trust. Not the naive kind that expects things to always go well, but the mature kind that believes you'll be held, even when they don't. That kind of trust cannot be taught in comfort. It is forged in the fire, in the letting go. In the moments when your plans collapse and all you have left is your breath and your God. And yet, those moments are holy, because they strip away what is false and reveal what is unshakable. They teach you how to live with open hands, how to love without controlling, how to grieve without despair, how to wait without rushing, and most of all, how to be present to your life, your body, your emotions, your relationships. This is strength, not controlling what comes, but staying grounded in who you are when it comes. Not avoiding pain, but allowing it to shape you into someone more tender, more wise, more alive. This kind of strength doesn't shout. It doesn't need to prove itself. It simply remains, anchored, honest, open. In the next part, we'll explore how surrender affects not just your inner life, but your relationships. How letting go of control can lead to deeper connection, compassion, and intimacy with others. The myth of control. How surrender leads to strength. Control doesn't just shape your inner world, it shapes your relationships. Often without even realizing it, we try to manage the people we love. We offer advice when what they need is presence. We push them to heal faster, love better, respond differently. Not because we're cruel, but because we're afraid. We want certainty. We want to protect them, protect ourselves, protect the relationship. So we try to guide, correct, persuade, fix. And in doing so, we suffocate the very thing we long for: connection. True connection can't happen in the presence of control, because control says, you must be this way for me to feel safe. But love says, I will remain with you even as you change. Surrender, in relationships, looks like this: listening more than speaking, asking before assuming, allowing people to feel without needing to rescue them from their feelings. It looks like releasing the belief that you are responsible for another's healing. It looks like trusting that people can grow without your interference. It looks like letting someone be who they are, even if who they are today makes you uncomfortable. This doesn't mean tolerating abuse. It doesn't mean ignoring your needs. Surrender is not silence. It is honesty without control. It is compassion without manipulation. It is the ability to say, this is who I am, this is what I feel, and I will let you be free to do the same. C.S. Lewis once said, to love at all is to be vulnerable. And that is terrifying, because when we love, we open ourselves to disappointment, betrayal, grief, to outcomes we cannot manage, to people we cannot control. And yet, that's exactly where the beauty is, because the only real love is free love. Love that is not coerced, managed, or earned. Love that is given and received without strings. Control tries to protect us from heartbreak, but it also prevents intimacy, because intimacy is built on truth, and truth requires freedom. When we surrender the need to control others, we make space for grace. We make space for people to come toward us, not because we demanded it, but because they chose to. And that choice, that voluntary, unforced movement toward one another, is where real relationship lives. You begin to see that the people around you are not projects to be completed, but mysteries to be honored. That their timing, their process, their wounds are not yours to fix but to witness. You stop offering advice when they're grieving. You stop expecting them to heal on your schedule. You stop needing them to be okay so that you can feel okay. And in that letting go, you become a safe place. Not because you say all the right things, but because you're no longer trying to control the outcome. You are simply present. Present in joy, present in pain, present in silence, present in love. And from that kind of presence, healing flows, for them and for you. In the final part, we'll explore how surrender is not the end of the story, but the beginning of a new kind of life, one built not on fear but on trust, not on control but on communion, not on striving but on grace. The myth of control, how surrender leads to strength. There is a moment in every soul's journey when the old tools stop working. Control, perfectionism, certainty, they served you once, they protected you, helped you survive. But now they're too heavy, and the spirit begins to whisper, let go. At first it feels like loss, like falling, like death. And in a way, it is. The death of the illusion that you were ever meant to carry everything alone. The death of the fantasy that life would obey your plans. The death of the belief that you had to be in charge to be safe. But death is not the end. It is the soil of resurrection. And what grows in that soil is peace, real peace. Not the kind that comes from everything going right, but the kind that stays when everything goes wrong. A peace that passes understanding. A peace that roots you in something deeper than circumstance. Trust, not blind trust, not passive surrender, but active, conscious, fierce trust. The kind that says, even here, even in this uncertainty, I will remain open. I will remain kind. I will remain grounded in love. This is the paradox. Surrender doesn't make you smaller. It makes you spacious. You stop reacting from fear. You start responding from wisdom. You stop chasing validation. You start living from your center. You become someone who can be still in the storm. Someone who no longer clings but abides. Someone who has learned that the greatest strength is not control, but communion. Communion with yourself, with others, with God. And from that place you begin to live differently. You move slower. You listen more. You speak with intention. You stop needing every outcome to validate your worth. You stop fighting every emotion. You stop running from pain. Instead, you welcome it as a teacher, as a guide, as something sacred. You discover that grace is not an escape, but a presence. A presence that meets you in the mess and doesn't rush you out of it. A presence that holds you when you're afraid and gently reminds you, you don't have to be in control. You have to be honest. You don't have to have all the answers. You have to be present. You don't have to fix everything. You have to love through it. This is the life on the other side of surrender. Not easier, but truer. Not painless, but full of meaning. Not perfect, but whole. Because your wholeness was never about control. It was about coming home to yourself, to God, to the quiet strength that has been holding you all along. The world will still try to tempt you back into control, but now you know the truth. Control may feel powerful, but it's not love. It may feel safe, but it's not peace. And when you feel the old fear rising, you can take a breath, place your hand over your heart, and remember, letting go is not losing. Letting go is how you return to grace, to presence, to strength that does not cling, but carries, strength that does not force but frees, strength that does not demand, but loves, the strength of surrender, the strength that holds you now,